Miami's newest additions had their first official practice today, so Kevin Love and Cody Zeller and their new teammates were all available to reporters. We give you our takeaways from the media scrum about how they're adjusting to a new team and ready to win, and why teammates and Eric Spoelstra are excited to get to work with them. All that and more on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcasts, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, the Miami Heat will be back on Friday taking on the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll get into who's going to be available for that game, including Kevin Love, who called joining the Heat, quote, refreshing and, quote, an easy decision. So we'll get to all of that in a minute. But let's start with Kevin Love saying that he doesn't necessarily expect to start, telling reporters that starting, quote, doesn't really hold any weight for me. I don't get worked up about that. I really feel like I just want to step in here and compete, further what they've already put in place, and yeah, definitely see some minutes, end quote. So, David, I know a lot of people have assumed that Kevin Love would just come in and start right away at power forward, but based on these comments, it does not sound like it's going to be the case. Has that been your takeaway, reading these comments and some of the other ones since Kevin Love got signed, or are the Heat perhaps just playing coy, and could we see Kevin Love starting on Friday?
Maybe nothing as overt as coy, but they're certainly leaving things open-ended. You know that Spo likes to play things close to the vest. He doesn't want to reveal all his cards to an upcoming opponent, doesn't release that starting lineup until the last second in order to keep even the smallest element of mystery going. So maybe there's that possibility, but just based on what players, Kevin himself, what Spo said to us after practice, I would assume that the start isn't going to happen right away. I tend to agree with Kevin Love's statement that starting doesn't matter. At this point in his career, it's not about proving that he's a starter or not. He can start. He's going to play minutes regardless. I think he's going to be out there on the floor either with or without Bam Adebayo for extended periods of time. So I would not expect him to start.
I don't expect him to start. I never expected him to start. I just, look.
Do you think he'll start at some point in the season?
I think he will start at some point, maybe. I don't know. I don't think that Eric Spoelstra knows. And look, the other thing we've seen with Spo is he can start a brand new starting lineup in game one of the playoffs. We saw that a few years ago with Goran Dragic coming off the bench.
You think he's going to be the new wrinkle he could bring in the playoffs?
Depending on the matchup, like if it's Cleveland in the first round, sure. Like, why not? Or Spo could say, you know what, let's just try to outsmall them and stick with our Caleb Martin. The lineup of Caleb Martin, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and Tyler Herro, like those four guys, regardless of whoever is that point guard, has been really good for them. The starting lineup has not been a problem for Miami. It's been playing small for 48 minutes is the issue. And then the bench has been a problem too. And three-point shooting and all these things. So Kevin Love coming off the bench, giving you different looks that you can get to throughout the game. And then obviously helping the three-point shooting. Those are all things that are still going to help Miami. And it just feels like some fans just like, they're like, oh, like if he's not starting, then why even sign him? And I'm just like, because it doesn't really matter. And you could tell based on the way that these guys are answering these questions, whether it's Kevin Love, Bam Adebayo, who I talked to, and that podcast, that conversation is available on the podcast only platform. So Apple Podcast, Spotify, you can find it there. Eric Spoelstra after today's practice, all of them are like, you ask them about Kevin Love starting, and they just like they kind of just wave it off. They don't care and that's the right way. They don't view starting the same way that fans do because they realize that there's 48 minutes in a basketball game, and it's more about the different kind of five-man groupings that you get to throughout the game that's more important than who's playing the first 6 minutes of the game.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It is not an obsession necessarily, but I think it's just the simplest view is saying, well, he's a starter, he's a better player, or else you wouldn't keep him on the bench. And if he's not that kind of a difference maker, then why, as a fan, should I get excited about the addition of Kevin Love?
But he's the only power forward on the roster, so you have to start a power forward, and people get kind of bogged down in the positions of things.
Yeah, I know. It is an interesting take. I personally, I think he should start. I mean, it depends on whether or not he's ready to play and whether or not he fits. I was having a discussion with somebody about another reporter, and he was talking about whether or not he would start. If you did start him, you'd have to probably put Gabe Vincent as a starter, or keep Gabe Vincent in as a starter. Something we'll talk about a little bit later on regarding Kyle Lowry and his current injury status. So the idea being that Gabe's point of attack defense would be stronger than Lowry's at this point in his career, and therefore wouldn't necessarily expose Love in certain situations when they switch on defense, especially on the perimeter.
The other thing is starting him and Tyler Herro together, right? And as much as Tyler Herro has gotten better defensively, he's still a point that defenses will try to force switches and attack.
Yeah.
And they're going to do the same thing with Kevin Love. So just having those two obvious attack points in your starting lineup, that doesn't make sense to me. And the other part of this too is you have a whole style of defense that you've honed and developed over the last 60 games. You're not going to just throw that out the window, right? Like what did the Heat want to do with Caleb Martin in that small group? They want to jump passing lanes, create turnovers, create points in transition, and all of those things. You could hate that if you want as a fan, as somebody who watches the Miami Heat, but that is what's going on here. And if you're going to bring in somebody like Kevin Love and just start him right away, well, now you can't play that defense anymore. And so it makes more sense to me bringing him off the bench where you could play a little bit more zone and cover him up that way. And look, if Kevin Love ends up being awesome, you can always make that decision to start him later. I think part of our jobs here is to make watching Heat games more fun. And there's a lot of ways that we do that, whether it's credit cookies or whatever. But I think part of it also is just informing the audience in just how NBA coaches and NBA teams operate. And without sounding too pretentious, right? I don't want to sound like a jerk here, but we've covered the NBA. We've covered teams. We're in these locker rooms. We're talking to people. We just know stuff, okay? And one of the things that I know about NBA coaches is that they're conservative. They're inherently conservative.
Yeah.
And for Eric Spoelstra to change up his starting lineup for a guy who was out of the rotation for another playoff team. This is not like they just got Kevin Durant, right? Like Kevin Love is a nice addition, as good as an addition as you can ask for in the buyout market. But he was out of the rotation in Cleveland. And coaches are inherently conservative. So they're going to bring in Kevin Love and you're going to, all right, come off the bench. We'll experiment with you in some different groupings. I don't even know how many minutes you're going to get. We'll just figure it out. We're going to experiment. And some people say, well, you only have 23 games left. That's not enough time to experiment. It is. And I would say, look, ideally you wouldn't only have 23 games left, but is it better to just switch up your entire starting lineup with 23 games left? No, it feels like it would be easier to experiment with somebody coming off the bench. So that's just part of this. And so, and that's what we know about NBA coaches, that they are conservative and that they're going to take their time, which could lead us to the point 20 games from now where Eric Spoelstra does say, you know what, he's ready to start. Let's start Kevin Love or not. And I think that Eric Spoelstra, I'm going to use your word earlier, open-ended. And that's what this is. And you know what? That's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I asked Victor Oladipo on it. He's the only other player on the roster who's been acquired in mid-season, and while he wound up not playing much and he was kind of nursing his way back from injury and everything else like that, so maybe the circumstances don't fit exactly apples to apples, I think the point is still a fair one, that the adjustment, takes some time in terms of trying to figure out your teammates' new tendencies and things of that sort, especially for a guy like Love who's expected to be an initiator on offense, involved in dribble handoffs, making the right passes. Spo talked about his passing ability, so I think there's some expectation there that he'll be at least partially a hub on offense. And then to go back to what I was saying about Oladipo, you kind of have to figure things out. It is not a seamless, instant process of going, you know what, get it out there and see what you can do. Even if he was the greatest player in the NBA, it would take some time to incorporate. That's absolutely fine. I'm glad that you brought that up. That starting doesn't necessarily matter as much as many people think it does.
Kevin Love also said that coming to Miami was an easy decision. But who did he choose the Heat over? We're going to talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, more or less. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drain. You can do all that with Kevin Love as well. Is he going to start? How many threes will he hit in his first game against the Milwaukee Bucks if he winds up playing at all? So many different options and so easy to do so on FanDuel. So many more exclusive bets like the 2x3. You can bet 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. That's a good one, although I wouldn't make that bet with Miami. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. It's there that you will find our exclusive conversation with Bam Adebayo and his takes on the Heat signing Kevin Love and his experience during All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City. Kevin Love said that he also considered joining the Philadelphia 76ers after his buyout from the Cavaliers, but in the end, quote, always looked at Miami as a place that would have been a great landing spot for me, adding, it was a pretty easy decision. Today, after practice, he called signing with the Heat, quote, refreshing. Here's my take on it. Kevin Love saying all the right things, all the things that Miami Heat fans want to hear. And boy, do you love the fact that he said going to Miami was an easy decision over picking the Philadelphia 76ers. Surprised by that at all? What are your things? What are your thoughts?
I did actually want to ask about it. I never quite got a chance to, but I was a little surprised in, why he reads things so differently as fans do. And, he's in the inner circles of the NBA. He understands the ebb and flow of a season. And maybe it was just something as simple as, I'll come in, take some money and play for a couple months on a team that's going to be contending for a playoff spot. But from what he said publicly to us, and the vibe was completely different around the team, he just seems really excited about getting to work. I was talking to him on the side before he joined the media scrum, and he's just really happy to be in Miami. He's here with his family. He's looking forward to get to work, just getting acclimated, getting fit in and winning. And he's really convinced, and he had me convinced by the end of our conversation that he's just going to make things are going to be better, that winning is going to come. Like, I don't know if it's just all puppy dogs and ice cream, but he is, to your point, exactly right, saying the right things to make every Heat fan happy. I don't know if it's just because he's a smart veteran and he knows exactly what to say, but I got a sense that there was genuine excitement there about fitting in, and that despite the fact that Miami's currently 7th in the Eastern standings, that he could come and not just get playing time, but also contribute to overall winning even deeper into the playoffs. So it looks like it's already from day one a pretty good fit.
One of the other things that he mentioned as being important was, having a role, more of a defined role, and being able to play to his strengths and all for a team that could really use it. And you look at the 76ers, and I just don't know that I think Kevin Love would be helpful, but they just signed PJ Tucker. Tobias Harris plays a lot of minutes at the 4. They've got a lot of different options. I don't know that they had that defined. Yeah, Niang's having a good year for them. I don't know that there's that role that the Sixers could promise Kevin Love, where in Miami they're going to say, hey, you might not start, you might come off the bench, you might play some 5, you might play some 4, but you're going to play minutes. And you're going to play minutes next to Bam, and you're going to play minutes without Bam, and you're going to be used. And we really need you. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of NBA players want to feel needed, right? Kevin Durant said that he wouldn't have joined the Golden State Warriors had they not lost in 2016. If they actually had held on to that 3-1 lead in the finals, he says, I wouldn't have joined the Warriors, because he thought, okay, you lost to LeBron and Cleveland. You need me. You need me to get you over the top. I think a lot of players just want to feel that they're wanted. Obviously, in Cleveland, Kevin Love no longer felt wanted because he was no longer in the rotation. And so, maybe Philadelphia said, we want you. We'll find some minutes for you. But if the Heat's presentation was, we need you, I mean, and by the way, it's February in Philadelphia versus February in Miami. So that's the other part of it too, is, you play a team and you respect the team like the Miami Heat from afar for so long. And I buy it. And a lot of players say that, and Miami Heat are a respected organization across the league. And you have a chance to come to South Beach and play and feel needed for a team. And you say, hey, you're in the playing tournament right now. You bring me in, we add a few wins, we go on a run, boom, you're in the playoffs. That was all me, baby. Like, you could feel like that if you're Kevin Love.
How much of it is him wanting a bigger role here in Miami that he would have gotten either in Philadelphia or Cleveland, or is it because he really does ascribe to all the things that he was talking about in terms of the positive vibes, the fact that
it's the role, 100%. It's the role. Yeah. If
which shouldn't take away, and none of that matters, right? I mean, like, so what if he wants a bigger role? Good for him. That means he's still hungry to do something. If he's going out there and looking at this as a 2-month,
does anybody look at that as a bad thing? I don't know.
I can imagine fans saying, "Oh, he's just coming in here. He's going to chuck shots. He's going to look to be selfish. He's not going to fit in, blah, blah, blah." Because he's looking for something more on the terms of in an individual benefit to him and not necessarily a team-wide benefit.
He wants to play. What's the problem?
But I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Like, if he wants to go out there and play heavy minutes and be productive and show the rest of the NBA, hey, guess what? Even at 34, I've still got it. That's great. That's great for Miami. That's going to translate into success. And look, I think we saw that for Jay Crowder too. He knew he was on basically a 2019 trial when he would join the Miami Heat and wound up, going on and having a nice run in the bubble. And he wound up taking that and turning into a 3-year deal that was pretty lucrative. So
I think also part of it is the money. Miami was able to use a portion of their biannual exception where other teams were limited to the minimum. And I think Philly was going to be limited to the minimum, but I could be wrong on that. Don't.
That's I think they're reporting I saw from Keith Smith and others.
There's other teams, the Lakers, the Warriors, maybe like all those teams probably would have been just limited to the minimum. The Phoenix Suns. And so and Kevin Love was also very open about that. Part of it was the money and the fact that Miami was able to get up to $3.1 million for the rest of the season means something. And I don't know the specifics of his buyout, but depending on how much money he left on the table, he could potentially be making more money than he would have made with whatever was left on his Cleveland contract. So that's part of it. All of it's part of it. He's able to make more money, play a role that he wasn't getting in Cleveland anymore, and play for a playoff team. I don't think that he would have just done this if it was the Orlando Magic or a team that had no shot at, even the Magic at least have a shot at the play-in. Like a team that has like the Pistons, like there's a team that has no shot at making the playoffs. I don't think that he would have gone there. Houston, San Antonio, like he wouldn't have done that. He wants to compete, and that's important. And you talked about the refreshing vibes around the team. Even Eric Spoelstra was asked about this after. It was like, hey, like having these new faces. It's been 8 months since we've gotten a new veteran player in Miami to talk to his media. And it's refreshing just for you and me, man. Like I feel like, and it just feels like everybody is excited by this. And that Eric Spoelstra said, yeah, it is exciting. It's exciting to have new faces in here. It's exciting to have that new challenge of incorporating players and new perspectives and all these kinds of things. And I buy all of it.
Yeah, I'm 100% there with you. Just quick detail on that. Apparently he took $7 million of an $8.5 million remainder that he was owed on his contract.
So he made $2 million.
So he made up $1.5 million, and they wound up making an extra $1.6 million because he took the whole 3.1. So yes,
a little bit more too. No state income tax. All matters.
It's not a bad deal if you can get it. I mean, if you want to bring me to Miami, well, I mean, I already live here, but if you want to bring me in, and I was living in Cleveland before for 2 months and $1.6 million, I'll just say I'll be happy to take the deal if anybody's offering it. But yeah, man, like I'm glad that you mentioned that. The vibes are just different. Like we walked in there after a pretty lengthy wait, and it's kind of a hustle and bustle and chaotic because there's some big music fest in Miami-Dade Arena, which I still cannot wrap my mind around. Yeah. And it's just a little bit of a mess, but then the practice goes a little long.
More media than I've seen all season at a Heat practice also.
Oh, yeah, like camera crews and people haven't been there in a long time. And everybody seemed excited. Like everybody just seemed like there's a new buzz, and you can feel this idea, just even from a player's perspective. Think of it a lot like the fans are feeling themselves. It's like, what are you going to do to make this team better? You say you believe in us. You say that we're good enough, but can you make changes to this roster that can help take us to that next level? And whether or not Love and Zeller actually wind up representing that much of a boost, at least in this sense, they've added a new dimension of excitement, a confirmation that this front office believes in this team and is committed, willing to pay an older veteran $3.1 million to lead us to victory, or to help lead us to victory.
And I asked Eric Spoelstra about this, like, hey, going into the buyout market, were these the positions that you were trying to find, the skill sets that you were trying to find? And he said, obviously at the trade deadline, nothing materialized that they wanted, but they are obviously out there looking. And then when Kevin Love became available, and, you talk about different options and all these things, and then Kevin Love becomes available, and he called that surprising. And he said, once Kevin Love was available and that became a possibility, it was all hands on deck to try to make it a brainer. So they really wanted Kevin Love. Kevin Love, I'm sure, felt very wanted by the Miami Heat organization. And isn't that what we all want, David? It's just to feel wanted at the end of the day. That's all we really want.
We all want love. Right?
We all want love. And now Miami has love. An update on Kyle Lowry and Omer Yurtseven here in a second. We'll tell you when they both can be expected back in the lineup and what their roles might be when they return. That's coming up here next. Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. Kyle Lowry was in the building today for the Heat's practice. He's ruled out for Friday's game. Will likely miss more time, but Spo said that he's making progress, and it sounds like the Heat will be patient with him. He will play again at some point. That's what it sounds like. Him being back with the team today after the All-Star break, that's a big deal. That's something that we didn't even know necessarily was going to happen. Kyle Lowry was not with the team before the break. And so now that he's back and all these things, we saw him. He was walking out as media was walking in. So we can confirm that Kyle Lowry was in the building. Let's put a pin in that and just get through some of these other injury updates. Omer Yurtseven cleared before the break for on-court work. He participated in practice today, was doing some 2-on-2 work when we walked in. He's going to be headed to Sioux Falls to the G League program soon to get in some work, some conditioning work before he eventually makes his Heat season debut. Other guys on the injury report ruled out, in addition to Yurtseven and Kyle Lowry, Nikola Jovic also ruled out. We saw him doing some 2-on-2 work. Tyler Herro was listed as probable, so we expect him to be available Friday night. This also means that Victor Oladipo is available after missing a lot of games. He's going to be available Friday night. So the Heat are going to have, or should at least have, most of their guys back as soon as Friday, and a couple more guys coming back in the near term. But let's just rewind. Let's go back to Kyle Lowry. What do you think of Lowry being back around the team?
I think it's great. I really do. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear it necessarily, but it's what I've been kind of optimistically thinking was the likely possibility, was that he's being held out because the lingering knee issue, it was a concern. You sit him out for extended amount of time when the team was going to be taking off anyway because of the All-Star break. Get him back into shape, get him back into a little bit of a stronger position, and just buckle down for the rest of the run, however long it lasts. If he comes back, let's say 2-3 games, and he's still available for the next 20 after that, maybe he takes a little bit break towards the end of the regular season, depending on where they are in the standings and the chase and things of that sort, and then concentrate on being healthy and productive in the playoffs. I think that's the best that you could hope for. Like, he's not getting bought out. He's not getting traded. I know so many people still believe that he'll come off the bench. I just don't see that as a possibility. I think he's coming back stronger, better, with the goal of reclaiming his starting spot and being part of the season push, like the playoff push, and helping guide his team to a better seed in the Eastern Conference standings, because that's what he's here for. This is why he's committed to winning, whether fans want to believe it or not.
Spo talked about Kyle Lowry, basically said this team, they're going to be patient with it, right? And that's basically the update that we got, and that obviously he was with the team now. The Miami Heat are better when Kyle Lowry is healthy.
Oh, I'm not sure if he's traveling with the team, though. He may not be on the sideline in Milwaukee.
Right. They're still trying to work out who's even traveling. Maybe Yurtseven might. They're still trying to work it out. The Miami Heat are better when Kyle Lowry is healthy. If he's healthy, of course he's going to be welcomed back. I'm not, depending on how much time he needs to miss, it might make more sense to bring him off the bench. I'm not ruling that out as a possibility. I would probably say it's the more unlikely option, but I would say it's possible that Kyle Lowry can return and come off the bench. If things are rolling with Gabe Vincent and they're figuring out lineups and maybe there's not that much time left, depending on how patient they're ultimately going to be with Kyle Lowry. But I know this, whether he's coming off the bench or he's starting, the Miami Heat are a better basketball team when Kyle Lowry is healthy and he's playing. And the entire goal is to be a better basketball team. So, yeah, all this time off, this is why the Miami Heat need to be patient. The last thing they want is for Kyle Lowry to play the way that he did before he was ruled out with injuries, because he was not playing well. And the last thing that they really want, David, is for him to not be available in the playoffs and not be as healthy as he could have been in the playoffs like he was last year, right? He was hobbled last year's playoffs, and that limited what Miami was able to ultimately do. So they are looking at this as saying, is Kyle Lowry less of sort of a necessity for us and maybe more of a bonus for us? Like a healthy Kyle, like Gabe Vincent has been good enough as a starting point guard that we don't necessarily even need Kyle Lowry to make this final push. And we're bringing in Kevin Love and Cody Zeller and we're getting other guys back and healthy. We have enough to make it out of the play-in tournament and end up getting one of the 5th or 6th seeds in the Eastern Conference. We feel good about that regardless of whether or not Kyle Lowry is part of it. So understanding that, just make sure Lowry's healthy for the playoffs. And then he's helping you, right? And then that's really when maybe you can make a run in the postseason.
No, no doubt about that. I think that's exactly what it is. They're sitting him out now because it matters more down the road for him to contribute, whether he's a starter or not. And again, both of us, I think, expect him to be a starter once he does return.
Let's talk a little bit about Omer Yurtseven, though I suspect that we'll get into more of this when he does eventually come back to the Miami Heat. But he's going to go to Sioux Falls for some conditioning work. It sounds like we did, like I said, see him doing some 2-on-2 drills after practice today when media were let into the gym. This is standard. A player going to the G League, who's eligible for the G League, going to the G League and just sort of rehabbing and conditioning. He had ankle surgery. So you would imagine that there wasn't a lot of conditioning work that he was able to do. So this is going to be a little bit tougher than the upper body injuries, right? Where you're still able to kind of run and stay in game shape. So standard stuff for a player to go to their to an NBA team's G League affiliate and then just get in some low risk, no risk run and get back into game shape. How long that's going to take, we don't know. We didn't really get a specific update on it. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, but he's working his way back. He's working his way back. So one thing I find interesting is what is Yurtseven working his way back to, right? With Cody Zeller now in the building,
Right.
Orlando Robinson still available in that 2-way contract. He's got like 8 or 9 games left on his deal. I think Yurtseven's going to be, and Kevin Love being able to come in and play some 5 as well. Like, I don't really know what role there is for Omer Yurtseven. I don't know that the Heat know necessarily, but I do think that they're going through this with the idea of when he does come back to the Miami Heat program, that he's going to get minutes in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, it's not quite clear, right? I mean, we talked about that even when the Zeller signing was originally announced. Like, wow, it's kind of an indicator that maybe they're not a believer in what Yurtseven can bring to the table right now, or maybe that, to your point, it doesn't really matter because once the playoffs roll around, either role would be mitigated and the rotation would get tightened, and there's not a lot of time for an unproven player like Yurtseven to get his experience, his game experience, and make an impact. So I don't know. I at this point, honestly, just judging, and I'm reading into this is not any reporting or anything like that, but just judging from the way Spo talked about Zeller and his addition to the team, like there's a mutual respect there. I would say Zeller's supplanted Yurtseven in terms of the rotation. Like I would think that either Love or Zeller is probably going to get the bulk of the backup minutes behind Bam over Yurtseven at this point. And obviously it works out that way if Yurtseven's in Sioux Falls, but even once he does come back, I could see Zeller getting that kind of respect because look, he's a proven NBA player. 10 years as a starter, and bad teams in Charlotte, sure, but you can't
some playoff teams.
Yeah,
he's got playoff experience. Yeah, I mean,
he up against Miami, like he spoke about it, like he's always had respect for the organization.
He was in the purple shirt guy game.
He sure was.
Yeah. So yeah, look, it's Cody Zeller's job to lose the backup traditional center, and like Kevin Love will probably get some minutes at the 5. But in terms, the Heat have been looking for a true backup center basically since it was clear
Dwayne Dedmon.
Well, Dedmon had a good year last year.
I'm not
basically all season long though, and when it was clear that the Dwayne Dedmon experiment had run its course and they were able to move on from him, they have been searching for a backup center. Omer Yurtseven with injuries like this, you just can't rely on him. As much as you would love to see Omer Yurtseven come in and average 10 and 10 the way that he was playing last year, you just don't know. And so you need some sort of insurance. I also think that the way, to your point, that Cody Zeller plays, involved in the dribble handoffs, he's got, look, he's not a finesse center, but he's got good ball skills, right? Like he knows what to do. He makes good decisions, and you need an experienced center, and that's why they didn't trust Orlando Robinson for playoffs, and they shouldn't because they've never seen him in the playoffs. Cody Zeller has playoff experience. He's been in the league for a decade. So they needed a backup center. They needed a veteran at that spot, and they went out and got one, right? Yeah. And if Yurt comes in with 20 games left or something less than that, and it just blows the doors open and says, hey, I'm back, and he's averaging the 10 and 10 and hitting threes and all these things, you're like, great. Now we have a backup center controversy. Now we have 2 backup centers. Like there's a lot of ways that this could go right. But you just couldn't rely on Yurt being the only backup center. And by the way, he's not available now. And they're going to want to play Kevin Love at the 4 and the 5. So you just needed somebody who was just a pure 5 available right now when every game matters so much more. Cody Zeller's going to come in. He's going to play some minutes right away. We'll see how many. But I also think that Yurtseven is going to it does provide another obstacle in Yurtseven's way to get those minutes on the court. but I think that the Heat are interested enough to see what it looks like, and when he does become available to Miami, that he'll see some minutes and they'll figure it out.
Yeah, there's no promise or commitment to either Zeller or Yurtseven, but I keep thinking that Zeller is going to wind up making an impact by the time the season ends. I
Me too.
just I don't know why he spoke about it, and I think he was a starter in Portland and he was a solid player there. I know they were having some injury issues with Yusuf Nurkic and things of that sort, but he suffered an injury, and that's why he was trying to rehab his way past that, and he got added to the Utah Jazz, who were going to blow everything up, and then they were going to be unexpectedly good. That nobody saw that coming. At the same time, I think, and he spoke about this, he took the time off from when he was cut in the preseason to this point now to get into shape, and he looked fine. I think he's ready to go.
He said he's more refreshed than he's ever been because he's got this extended time off and all these things. Now, every NBA player is going to say that. I think I asked him the question, like, you've never been off the court for this long in your basketball playing career. He's like, yeah, isn't that great? And I was like, oh, I guess that's I guess so. What else is he supposed to say? That's what he's going to say. Just
no,
like
but there's a point about that. And I remember a lot of players I've talked to over the years have mentioned that, like, an injury allows them to watch the game differently. And I don't know how much Miami Heat basketball he was watching specifically, so maybe fans won't necessarily care about, but they get a different perspective about how they can fit in, how they can make an impact on a certain team. So there's something to be said for that.
He's going to see minutes right away. I'm pretty convinced. The way that Spo was talking about him, he's like, yeah, he's in game shape. He's in condition. Blah, blah, blah. Nothing replaces 5-on-5, but he's ready to go. And it's like, all right. And then with Cody Zeller, I do think that stuff that Bam does at center, he's not going to do it at that level, but he could replicate some of that in backup minutes in terms of making the passes, the dribble handoffs, all that kind of stuff. Like, he's done that in Charlotte. It's why he's been in the league as long as he has.
Does he get a dunk against Milwaukee?
Probably not.
On a pick and roll. You don't think so?
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know. Right. Is that on
not a lob?
FanDuel?
Maybe not a lob dunk. I wonder. That could be his the over under on his first alley-oop dunk.
Yeah. I don't know.
Are you looking it up, or did I just throw you out completely?
I don't know. I don't know if he's an alley-oop kind of guy.
Isn't he? You can catch a lob.
He can catch a lob. I feel like alley-oop is like dunk con. Yeah, he can catch a lob, just like kind of standing there. Yeah.
So he's just
game and a half. Game and a half over under. Game and a half. I don't know. Right. We'll see how many minutes he gets Friday night. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. Now make your second listen game-to-game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.